Welcome everyone to our Level Up Services webinar for February. We're so happy to have you all join us. We're happy to have our guest Lucy with us. We'll do introductions here in a second. I just want to mention from the top, if you've joined our Level Up series any month in the past, we were previously on Zoom. This month we are switching to Teams. We'll be on Teams moving forward as well. So bear with us if we have any technical issues launching polls or sharing screens or transitioning slides. But I think we have a firm grasp on everything. Typical housekeeping as normal. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. There's also a Q&A section as well. I'll be monitoring the chat in the Q&A, and we'll be staying on top of that. We're also recording the session, so later today or tomorrow, I will send out the recording and the slide deck to everyone that registered. So if you weren't able to join us for the whole thing, we will send out the recording. So, we'll start off with introductions. My name is Kevin Wood, Business Development Manager here at NPact. I will be kind of hosting today, but taking a back seat because we are so happy to have a guest on today, Lucy Ruiz from Sentinel Consulting, and I will allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Greetings. I see some folks from Tennessee and Iowa. And I saw some people from Maine. So greetings from sunny Toronto today, because we are starting to see everything melt because we've had enough snow to give away, as I like to say, party favor wise. So I'm from Sentinel Consulting. I'm the owner and founder, and we do all things data and love to help our clients work on operational excellence. So whether that be your data, your policies and procedures, your workflows, your Power Automate and Power BI, and we love working with the great folks at NPact, who we partner together with quite a bit. So thank you for having me on today.
So glad to have you. Just to introduce myself as well, since I'm the last one to go. I'm Christine Robertson. I am the consulting manager here at NPact. I do a little bit of everything from helping consult with some of our clients to managing a team of our consultants. And the fun part of my job is every month I get to do these webinars with Kevin. I love getting to see where everyone's from and having these conversations. So a little bit of our background today for this presentation. Oh, we're going to get to our questions for you first. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Go ahead, and we want to know a little bit about who's with us today and where you're coming from and what your background is. So the first question is, how did you hear about us today? What was the way that you heard about this webinar? So go ahead and vote and let us know, and then we'll see those results here in just a second so we can have an idea. All right, Kevin, since you're there we go, we've got our results. So a lot of emails. So apparently our email's the best way for you to hear from us. Great to know. The next question for you is, how long have you worked with donor data? So know that's different for everybody, but would love to have a sense. Are you brand new? Is this your first role? Have you been in this for a year to 3 years, or all the way up to 10 years or more? So just to kind of have an idea. No judgment, of course, but just to kind of know where we're all coming from. All right, we've got some major veterans here with us. About half of you have been in donor data for over 10 years. Love that. I think we all know there's definitely things to keep learning the longer we go, and the more our world and our industry are changing. Last question for now. Do you have a data management plan? So let's go ahead and pop that up. So yes, you have a plan in place. Maybe it needs some tweaking, but you've got something. No, there's nothing in place and you're starting at ground zero, or sort of. Maybe you've got something, but you're not really sure what it needs to have, what it does have. Great. Great.
My favorite kind of data management plan is the one that gets passed down from your successor, where it's not necessarily written down, but it's something that we talked about before they left.
So about a quarter of you have something in place, and it looks like about 3/4 of you have nothing, or you have sort of have something. So I think we've got a lot to kind of work from today. So I'm going to let Lucy tell the story of the stairs. But the one thing I do want to say is our goal today is really, we want to ask questions and we want to think with you. So I just kind of want to start with, we've talked about, do you have a plan? There is no way Lucy and I can say, here is your plan and hand it to you, but we want to help you get there. So Lucy, please give us the story of the stairs.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, everyone. So this is a true live shot. And if you are a parent out there, you know that you probably leave stuff on the stairs all the time, so that in the hope that someone will see their stuff and take it up the stairs. So, and this is where the sort of the idea of, are you data responsible or responsible for your data, sort of came to be. And this is a live action shot, I believe, of last week, of what our stairs look like, with, stuffies and shoes and books and just everything that life has to throw on you. And hope springs a turtle in our house every day. I hope that someone's going to grab their gear off the stairs. So this is where the inspiration. So this is my stairs. So I'm hoping that we will help your metaphorical stairs of your database, and will help you come up with a plan. Because right now in our family, we are working on the plan that even if it doesn't belong to you, you could probably help someone along the way. Just like it's not just my job to keep the house clean, it's sort of everyone's job to help keep it clean. So if you can pick up someone's book, or you can pick up half a crock or a stuffy, then you're helping everybody out.
I love it. Very real piece that we can all relate to, no matter how many people live in our houses. So our agenda today, we want to start thinking through the question of who's responsible for the data. I think sometimes that's a question that we don't dig into in enough ways, just like those stairs. Who's responsible for getting the stuff off the stairs? The parents, the kids, the grown adults who all live together, whoever that case may be. We want to kind of look into a couple areas as well, though, within that. How do you get your data? What is responsibility in that context? What is responsibility in what you do with your data? And then the last one we want to talk about is who has access to your data. So there's lots of responsibility pieces we want to look at along the way with all those areas. So we're going to start with who's responsible. And Lucy and I started to sit down and think of different roles of people who might be touching your data. And we want to kind of talk through some different considerations about what responsibility looks like in these roles. This is absolutely a great place for you all to think through this, and maybe throw some things into the chat, and maybe thoughts and ideas that you have as we go. So let's start with our obvious person, the database manager. Lucy, what parts of the data responsibility do you see falling under a database manager?
Well, database manager can mean so many things to so many different organizations, everywhere from you are the chief data entry person and list puller, right down to, hey, do you help decide policies? Do you work with vendors? Do you work to educate your teams about how to work and engage with the data? And you probably are all doing a lot of those things, even though it's not a bullet point on your roles and responsibilities. But I would love to see, and if we have any, leaders on this team who do work on those roles and responsibilities, to really start putting data management and some data responsibility tasks on those roles and responsibilities. I'd love to see more of that, because it generally only falls on the database manager, and I'd love to see that broaden a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also the pieces of database managers can only be responsible for parts they actually have. So if the donor gives the major gift officer a new email address, and the major gift officer doesn't give it to the database manager and doesn't put it in Razor's Edge, it's hard to say that the database manager was responsible for having that email address updated if they don't even know that they needed that information. So that layer of responsibility can shift around with what they know and what they don't know and what they're aware of needing to be updated. But documenting that, I think, is certainly important. Like you said, I think we all know that. What about our C-suite leaders, Lucy? Where would you kind of see them fitting into our data responsibility?
100%. So I kind of call it the reverse pyramid of access. So the higher you are in the org chart, you tend to have less access to the database. But we now live in a world where our tasks and our roles and responsibilities have sort of migrated upward, as I say. So if you are in an org where you're back in the day, we used to live in the world where it's like, no, I'm the only one who can put in a phone number or an email address or change some information. We've got to empower staff, even our C-suite leaders, to say, hey, if you do have a bit of information and you're not sure where it goes, hey, feel free to reach out and say, hey, I've got a new bit of data. So and so just got married, so we need to add a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
But to train them, hey, you can't, we all know how to fill in an Amazon order form, right? So then you know how to fill in a database form, whether you're an NXT user or any other database. But I would imagine we have mostly NXT users um, in the webinar today.
Probably.
But
We
yeah,
didn't ask about, today we didn't ask people about their CRM, so we're just guessing.
Yeah.
I think the other big piece that I would put with C-suite leaders is, as they're responsible for the overall organization, I think there's a piece of data responsibility that falls under that sometimes gets missed in setting policies, as far as helping think through security access, helping think through, practices of, is it ethical to do this? Is it moral? And we'll get into some more ethical and moral conversations, but I think our C-suite leaders, while they may not be in our database every day, and they may not even actually do any of the admin, I think we need them to help guide our conversations about overall responsibility, because they are overall responsible for our organizations, which I think gives them a responsibility for the data, even if they never touch it.
100%.
I think major gift officers falls a lot into what you just said about updating your own information. If you know that this person got married, there's a new email address, that they want to be called BJ instead of their given name, or whatever the case may be, getting that in the system. Is there anything else that you would add for a major gift officer, Lucy?
I would say also adding meaningful data into the system. So we all know that major gift officers are responsible for those call reports. Make sure that you're adding meaningful enough data that if you were to look at this 6 months from now,
You know what it means?
that it makes sense.
Right. No, that's
because
a great
we've
point.
all combed through I know I've combed through as a major gift officer, I've combed through old, one of the first things you do is comb through those old notes and engagements and interactions with donors. And you're like, what did this mean?
Right.
What was I saying? So make sure it doesn't have to be a lot, but it has to be meaningful. So I don't know how many folks, if we've got some folks here who are 10 plus years, you all remember back in the day when you used to have to write those. I had a manager who had a 2-page minimum for contact reports. I was like, I used to write about everything and I'd triple space it just because how else was I going to fill the page?
2 pages.
It should be meaningful. What's the next step?
Right.
And what are you going to do to develop that relationship? That is really ultimately what someone who's reading this down the road wants to hear. And
yeah, absolutely. I think, with the rest of the roles on this list, marketing and communications, they are most likely the people who know when you have email addresses that are bouncing or unsubscribes. What is their responsibility for making sure that's communicated clearly across the board? Front desk staff, I think, are the people who know everything. And sometimes we miss how much institutional knowledge they have, because they're the face that everyone sees when they walk in the door. So whether or not they're in your database, I think it's important to recognize their institutional knowledge, their relational components, and find ways to get that information in your system. Volunteers and board members, I think, also becomes a little bit, that's more of a security issue too, I think, of what do you want them to be responsible for? What is ethical and moral and secure in your system? I worked at an organization for many years when I was early in my career, and we had a volunteer who came in every week, twice a week, and he helped me do gift entry. But he signed security, he signed confidentiality clauses. We knew he knew Razor's Edge. That's what I was using at the time. We had a lot of things in place. So yes, he was a volunteer, but we treated him almost like an additional staff member. He just didn't get a paycheck. But there were lots of pieces in place. So I think for those roles, it's very dependent, but you need to think about what that looks like. Lucy, I wanted to, I know we're kind of going past those roles because I want to make sure we keep going in our conversation, but do you have anything else for any of those roles that you would add that people need to consider?
I think the biggest thing that I would look at is look at beyond the biographical data. Think about how the interactions with our donors make sense to maintain in the system. So for example, it doesn't, it could be helpful to know that the Johnsons also have a family home in Vail, because that definitely indicates some form of wealth or affluence. But to know that it was gifted from someone, or that they paid $9.9 million for it, how meaningful is that? How valuable is that? And does that help move our engagement forward? If it doesn't, then you don't need to put it in there. And I think having those thought processes about knowing what makes sense. Is it enough to know that they have a place in Vail? I think so. Do we need to know that they bought it at a certain price? Maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't. But bottom line is, have these conversations with folks at the table, with the other stakeholders in your organization. And I know there's never time to have these conversations, but if we don't have these conversations, we'll never know what are the gaps. And I think that's the biggest, we have to make the time to have these conversations.
Absolutely. And I think the moral of this story, the answer of who's responsible, I think it's the same as the answer of who's responsible for Lucy's stairs. Everybody is responsible in some way. It's what is each person's layer of responsibility. And I think that will differ organization to organization. But as we start to think about it in that context of everybody is responsible for something, and how do we encourage people in that responsibility, that's our main role. So I want to go ahead and I have a couple questions along those lines that I wanted to kind of throw out there. So as you're building out your policy, what responsibility is tied to each role at your organization? Make sure you document that and think that through. And it, quite frankly, I expect it's going to change over time as roles change, as the people in those roles change. Some things may be different. So keep that, make it a living document. Well, how do your security settings tie to those roles? Lucy mentioned that with the C-suite leaders. We don't want to give security settings that aren't appropriate for roles, either direction. If it's my job to make sure all the gifts are entered correctly, I need access to gifts. I need access to edit gifts. I need access to maybe post those gifts to the general ledger. If it's not my job to do that, I probably don't need rights to do that. How do you empower your team to take responsibility for their data? I think we could spend an hour on that just alone. But thinking through, what does empowering them look like? Does it mean training them on how to do something? Does it mean showing them where this lives and how it works? That's probably more just training in another way. But what does empowering them to take responsibility look like? Does it mean we need to really encourage them to see the whole data? Do you have a code of ethics or a data management policy to adhere to? I think many of you say, from what you've said today, I think many of you don't. And I think this is a really important thing to start talking about and getting in place as organizations. What is our ethics around our data? And have that evolve as laws are changing. I know we've talked, Lucy and I talked about that a lot as we were preparing for this. Different states have different legislation. Canada has different legislation than the US. The UK has different legislation, and we all are responsible for adhering as much as we possibly can to a lot of that legislation, even if you don't live in those areas. Our email especially has a lot of requirements. So keeping those things in mind. And I think the last piece to that is, who are your vendors and what standards do you hold them to? Lucy, Kevin, and I are all three vendors. So we're saying this from the side of being the vendor, but one of the things that makes me cringe fairly often is when people email me spreadsheets with extremely sensitive information in it. I've had credit card numbers sent to me in emails, not by any current clients, for the record. So if you're on this call and you're a current client, you're in the clear. But I've had people send me things in email that should never have been sent to me in email. I cringe because I care about my customers. I care about your data. I want you to hold me to the highest standard with your data, and I want you to hold yourselves with that. So what standards are you going to hold us to? And what standards are you going to hold every other vendor to? Lucy, I know I just kind of read through the slides, so I want to give you the mic and get your feedback too.
Yeah, thanks. So a couple things that come to mind. One of the first things, if you do not have this, for you folks who said, no, you don't have a data management plan or sort of, I would strongly encourage you that you have an understanding of the principle of least privilege. And what that really means is essentially, as Christine stated earlier, you should only have access to data that you require for your job. And it's better to start off with a more restrictive approach and then open up the access as required. So, for example, do you need access to gift data? My biggest thing, and I know that there have been a couple discussions in the community forums about security access. How do we restrict that not everyone should be able to export your database out of the database, like out of RE? How do you prevent from someone to say, hey, give me everyone's first name, last name, address, and email and phone number? Do they need that? Maybe they need to view it, but they don't need to be able to export it. Some people need to add and edit, but they don't need to overwrite. So we really need to think about what that means. And we need to think about how the principle of least privilege can line up with our roles and responsibilities. So that's another layer, because now you've got your internal roles and responsibilities, and then you've got to add the layer of complexity of what functionality does the application give you, because they're not always concerned about, you know, Blackbaud's got to worry about creating a product that's flexible enough for all. So they can't worry about what's happening at your organization. That's where your guardrails have to come into place. So very, very important, as Christine said. So the principle of least privilege, um, please, please, please make sure you've got access to something in place or a framework in place. The other one, as a vendor, that Christine and Kevin mentioned, were the fact that as vendors, please don't email us lists. Most vendors nowadays will have either some form of SFTP site, like Blackbaud has, a Dropbox, or SharePoint links where you're just
SharePoint
linking
links
a
can
file.
be emailed for sure.
Awesome. Because they require multi-factor authentication, because I can only send them to you as the user. No one else can access them. If they access them, the email request to put in the code will go to whoever the original recipient was. So for example, if I sent Christine a file and Christine sends it to Kevin, Kevin opens that link, it'll say, hey, you'll get a code, but it'll actually go to Christine's email because that's who sent it in. So please make sure that you're very clear on how that works. Make sure that your vendors share with you what is their policy, their security policy, their retention policy, their access policy, and their destruction policy. So you internally should have those three policies in place, right? When we work with our clients, we tell them we're going to hold on to that data only while working on their project, and then up to 2 weeks after, and then we destroy that data. So you can't come back to us and go 3 months from now, hey, remember that file I gave you? Please, 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 do you have it? I wish I did, because if it helps you out, but I won't. So
Right.
that's something to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next question in all of this with our data, we talked about the people and the responsibilities of those, but I think there's a big piece of this of where are we even getting our data from? And I think it depends on your organization in part. You know, if you're a school, you're going to get a lot of information when parents register their children for school. If you are at an organization doing a lot of nonprofit events, people go on your website, they fill it out, they sign up, they give you their information. So maybe the data is coming directly from donors. Maybe you're purchasing or renting lists. Maybe you found it on the internet. I'm sure many of you have done this as well. I have often found an obituary and seen information and entered it directly into a constituent record. So lots of different sources. I think there's a responsibility in thinking about that and in paying attention as our world is becoming more concerned with data privacy. I mentioned the obituary because I've done it many, many times. I also am now starting to wonder if there's times where that may not be as ethical. You know, if I go in and I see, oh, this says that this person is married to another person, and I put that other person's name in my system, I don't know that the spouse wants to be in my system. I'm just assuming because I saw it in an obituary and I typed it in. And that's where I say, I think we need to think about, where is the data coming from? Is it even ethical to add it to our system if we don't know, if they didn't give it to us, if we didn't talk to them? I am not saying it is not ethical. I'm saying it's a question we all need to be asking. So as we're looking at that, where did our data come from? What is the intended purpose of the data?
That's a big one. That is a really big one.
If they gave it to you, why did they give it to you? So if I give my email address to the school when I sign my kid up, and I don't say yes or no, you can email me a fundraising email, do you have permission to send it to me? I am, again, not saying you do or you don't. I'm saying I think these are all questions we need to really consider as we're going into this.
Yeah.
And
The other
that
one,
really, that
sorry, go ahead,
consent, yeah,
Christy.
go for it.
So the other point that I would like to make is also, if you are collecting cell phone numbers because you want to make sure you can reach out to them via text to
Yeah.
give, or you want to call them, make sure that that is expressly stated. I know we kind of like, oh, they won't give us their cell phone number if they know we're going to use it in this manner or that manner. Well, then maybe we shouldn't be collecting that. And I know that that hampers some thought processes, but then it means, okay, then let's expressly indicate that you're, if you've put it into one of our forms, you're getting a text message because you filled out one of your forms. Isn't it nice when you get a brand new text message from someone that they say, you've received this email, you've received this text because you've signed up for X, Y, or Z. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did probably fill out that advocacy form, or I did fill out that
Right.
form for my child's school.
Then you know.
Okay, now I understand why I'm getting this list, right? So, grateful patience. I know in Canada and even some parts in the US, in California, they're starting to get a little bit more restrictive with those grateful patient lists, right? Um, because it's not okay to have certain bits of data. Back in the day, it was okay to collect. Are you a survivor? Do you have cancer? Or are you a family supporting someone with cancer? That was okay to keep in your database. But if you're not using it, why are we keeping it? Right? Just because we've always done it does not mean we should continue to do it. So let's think through the whys.
And I think HIPAA is a huge piece in that. And I think most everyone here who's working in hospitals or other care facilities, I'm sure, are far more familiar with HIPAA than I am. I know enough with HIPAA to know we have to be so careful about anything we're tracking that relates to someone's medical care and who can see it and where it is. So even if you're not in an organization that does medical care specifically, I've worked with camps that have to talk about, well, we had a medical form for every camper. Are you following HIPAA with that information? Because if you have information that's medical that could be problematic, I think you need to do your due diligence and ensure that you're handling it with respect and care. So that brings me to the next question of, what do you do with your data? Are you including it in internal reports? If so, who can see it and should they? Does everybody on your staff need to see the employee giving report? Personally, I want to know how much someone else is giving on payroll, and unless I need to. If I'm the one processing payroll, I do need to. If I'm the gift entry, I do need to. But does the rest of the team need to know? What does your report look like? What's being published? I mean, I think we've all seen the annual reports that maybe somebody wanted to be anonymous and their name got published anyway. Where is it being shared? Are you sending it in emails? I know we said that earlier. I will bang that drum forever. I think, Lucy, I think I can say you will too, because we care about this stuff and we care about emails that get hacked or things that get scattered to the wind that shouldn't. A huge thing to me is, are you honoring all known constituent requests? If I unsubscribe from an email in your MailChimp account, am I still getting email because I'm on a list in your donor CRM that did not get marked as unsubscribed. Maybe that's okay. Maybe I unsubscribed in MailChimp because I don't want your newsletter because, I don't know, I'm a heartless person who doesn't want to see the animals that you're saving every day. But my, Razor's Edge account is sending me my gift receipts every month, and I do want those. So if that's the case, then that's fine. But if I say, I never want to hear from you again in MailChimp, and you still email me out of Razor's Edge, that's not fine. And then just kind of coming back again, I know we've said this over and over, but those legal and ethical responsibilities, email and privacy laws, are your unsubscribes robust enough to account for, they don't want newsletters, but they do want thank you emails. They don't want appeals, but they do want newsletters. If they're not, and you're sending them everything, even if they said they didn't want anything, make sure you're right on that. And I don't need to mention HIPAA again because I already did. Lucy, what do you have to add about what people do with their data?
I think a big one is making sure that you understand why you're housing your data. So I'm a big believer that, especially for reporting purposes, it should be we collect data if it's used to sort, if it's used to filter, or if it fulfills some sort of data point requirement within our organization. Otherwise, we really need to think twice. And we really shouldn't just hold on to data because, oh, that would be a nice to have. If it's a nice to have, then let's start using it. The other piece is, let's be okay with, if someone does unsubscribe, I know that you can use tools to say, such as Power Automate, to say, hey, I want to see everyone who's marked in as unsubscribed. And do we give them one last chance? Because sometimes people don't get why they unsubscribe too, right? Because a lot of these tools, it's a binary type of approach. It's you're either in or you're out. But you don't realize that, hey, if I unsubscribe to this, that means I'm not going to get information from point A or B. Maybe I'm not going to get the alumni newsletter. Maybe I'm not going to get the newsletter from the president of that humane society. So let's be very clear about that. So I think that's a great example. Oh, I think we have some questions.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, so that's what you just said, Lucy, is a really good segue into the question that Beth just posted in the Q&A. Do you have any suggestions regarding reaching out to donors to obtain their communication preferences retroactively?
I would say there's kind of, communications fall into two broad categories. I'm saying broad because you could subcategorize these in many different ways. But I would say there's sort of the business side of the house. So tax receipts, something that we really need to alert you about because it's maybe a recall on something or a program development. And then there's informational, where maybe you don't want to get every event newsletter, or maybe it means that we scale back. So I know I've done a lot of charity runs, and then you sign up once and then you're bombarded with like 900 emails, right? So maybe we've got to figure out what that right balance is. So obtaining those from donors, really, really helpful. Sometimes it could be a checkbox even on a donation form. How would you like to hear from us? Email or text or other? So yeah, definitely asking them. It should be a two-way street, communication with your donor.
And it does get really tricky. And one of my clients is an addiction recovery center, and they are very, very careful with all of their alumni. They only send mailing if they have agreed, the alumni have agreed to get mail. They don't do it. They don't say, tell us you don't want mail. They basically say, tell us you do want mail, because they've had situations where alumni didn't want everyone to know that they were alumni of this program. They didn't want everyone in their lives to know they'd spent time doing recovery. And that's their prerogative with HIPAA. That's part of their medical story, and they may not want to share it yet, or they may not want to share it with some person. And getting a letter in the mail may cause them to have to deal with things that they don't want to deal with. And that's something to be careful and sensitive to. Just since we've got 10 minutes, I'm going to segue us over to the access to your data. And just thinking about, we've kind of touched on some of this, but thinking about your security risks, who has access to your data. So under security risks, one of the first places we put is your servers. Now, A lot of us are using cloud-hosted tools, which mean that the servers aren't under our direct control. But that means asking questions of the people who have those servers and what is their practice? What is their policy? If there is a breach or anything like that. No, kind of having a sense of that, at least knowing where your data is and who has access to the server. And if it's on site at your organization, is that server protected? These are IT people questions, not necessarily us development people questions, but I still think it's good for us to at least have some sense of things. Who has access to your donor CRM and your financial general ledger? I am a huge proponent of there should never be a single person at your organization who has all three of the following. Donor CRM, supervisor access. Financial general ledger, supervisor access. And bank accounts, ability to make withdrawals, deposits, changes, etc. I think there are lots of people who have two of the three, but I'm a proponent of nobody should have all three. Because if I have all three and I want to be up to no good, I can make the money go away. I can take it out of the bank account. I can change the general ledger. I can change the donor record. It's gone. And it's a lot harder for someone else to find it. So I'm a huge proponent. Nobody has all three. 2 out of the 3 is fine as long as there's checks and balances and securities. That's a personal piece. Vendors, we did talk about a little bit already, so I don't want to reiterate that. But just what are our other obligations? What do our security, do we remove rights when people leave our organization?
Yep,
I think so. I hope
having
so.
a way of how to do that. Yeah. And if you all know in NXT that you have to make sure you have a group of non-users where there's no rights, so you can move them into that group so that we haven't lost their reports, their queries, etc. But they no longer can access the Razor's Edge, or they can no longer access, whatever tools that Blackbaud may provide. For example, multi-factor authentication. We now live in a world where even, as I said, your links. So if you are working with someone who's, or an application and there's no multi-factor authentication, definitely do it. I know there's options to opt out of multi-factor authentication. If you can, and I know it's a pain, please do so. As a vendor, and I know that on our team, we do not remove the multi-factor authentication when we access our donor databases within the Razor's Edge. So as much of it's pain that I have to wait by the phone, get my ID, get that text message with that special code and type it in,
right?
We still do that because we're adding that added bit of security to our for our clients. You are also making sure that data is only maintained in a certain way, and even internally, which staff can access it, right? Not everybody needs access to everything. And my big one is, please, please, please don't give everyone access to be able to export your entire database out of the system. That is a huge one.
I would also add, if I had $1 for every time I open a new client's database and I see old Blackbaud accounts from your implementation, other consultants, etc., all in there as still active users with supervisor rights, I could take a lot of us out to lunch on those dollars. If you're done working with a consultant, if you're done with a Blackbaud implementation, take away the access.
100%.
I don't know any. I don't know of any consultants that I would say, oh, I think that one's going to do you wrong. But do the due diligence for your own organization and protect your database. If you're not working with that consultant anymore, take their rights away. I think any consultant worth their salt is going to tell you that. We all want to protect you if we're doing this for the right reasons. Since we've got 5 minutes, I'm going to kind of, we've talked a lot about our reporting. We've talked about emailing sensitive data. So I think we've covered that. Code of ethics. There was somebody posted in the Blackbaud community this week their sample code of ethics, and I thought it was, or maybe it was last week, but I think a code of ethics is a great place to start. Asking your staff to sign this, giving them specifics of you're not going to export data that you don't need to, you're not going to share it with anyone outside of your organization without prior authorization, whatever that looks like. But getting it in writing and getting your staff to sign this, getting your consultants to sign this if you need to, we do non-disclosure agreements with our clients. I know I don't do all of the paperwork for everything we do, but we've got contracts and things in place that say this is how long we keep data. This is what that looks like. Make sure you're taking care of that on your side too. I do want to leave a little bit of time since we've got about 5 minutes left. Kevin, are there other questions that have come up, things that people are asking or talking about that we haven't seen since we've been focused on the conversation?
Nope. Yeah.
All right. Well, this is your time.
Yeah.
You can add it. So go ahead and type that in if you still have that. I'm going to pull up our next slide while you're doing that, just to kind of start to let you know about a couple things that we've got going on at NPact. And then also, Lucy, if you've got things going on at Sentinel, I want you to have a chance to throw that out there. March is busy for us. We are kicking off our K-12 Learning Lab. It is a small learning cohort for those of you who work at independent schools / K-12 schools. A couple seats left, so it's not too late if you want to join, but we are limiting this class size down. It's being taught by 2 consultants who both have worked at a K-12. We're going to walk through how do you use Razor's Edge with the K-12 school in mind. So what are some best practices specific to things like constituent codes, and how do you work on doing alumni giving, and all of those different kinds of things interwoven in just using Razor's Edge. So it's a great opportunity if you're at a school and you've got somebody who's new to Razor's Edge or somebody who just wants to make sure that they've got that all in place. We're hoping to roll out some of these for other areas like higher ed and things like that as the year goes on. So if you're interested, but you're not at a K-12, please email Kevin and I and let us know. We are also really excited. Starting in March, we are going to be doing Financial Edge webinars as well. So I think this is probably mostly a Razor's Edge donor development crew here today. But if you work with anyone in Financial Edge, we are going to do an Ask Us Anything. Kevin and I won't be answering the questions because you don't want us to answer FE questions. But we have 3 teammates who are FE experts, and they are ready to go and answer whatever questions you have. So we're really excited for them to get to do that. And then the last thing that Kevin and I are doing is in the end of March, we are doing a Razor's Edge reports version, Ask Us Anything. So we've had lots of questions coming up every time we do an Ask Us Anything. We're limiting this one to just the topic of reports, which isn't really that much of a limit because let's face it, you guys can throw some crazy reports at us. So our level up next month will be that Ask Us Anything Razor's Edge reports, and we hope you can join us. The QR codes for the FE and the RE events are on the screen right now, so feel free, screenshot it, sign up, be ready to go. If you want the Learning Lab, just email Kevin or I afterwards and we'll get you everything you need for that. Lucy, do you guys have anything coming up that you'd like to tell everybody about?
Yeah, so in the middle of March, we're going to be doing a CRM, love it or list it. We did a whole series on LinkedIn about, do you love your database or do you list it? Or do you switch it up? There's a lot of considerations to take into place. So we'll be doing that. And then we'll also be doing hey, dip your toe in the Power BI world. And we will have our expert database extraordinaire, our database writer, Amir, heading that up. If you want to learn how to connect the Power BI connector to your Razor's Edge database, if you want to create a really, really easy report to dip your toe, and then how do you take that basic, matrix report and make it a visualization with a nice graph with some pretty configurations, maybe add a logo here and there, sort of dip that toe. Amir will be walking us through all of that fun stuff. So would love to have you folks join us. And, the more people that are working with the tools available, the better off we all are. I mean, Christine, Kevin, and I have these conversations all the time that it's about making sure that we help be good neighbors and help everybody elevate everyone's knowledge together. So that's why we collaborate all the time. I mean, we're constantly emailing each other going, what did you think about that? Or how would you do that? And often people are like, but you guys are both consultants. It's like, yeah, we can help each other out and it helps the community as a whole. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we'll get you an email. Kevin will be sending out emails with the recording and with links and all that information. Kevin, I know we're at time, but I do want to give you a second to explain NPact's offerings and do your last question of the day.
Yeah, and I just saw a couple more questions that popped up that the RE QR code didn't work. I will send out the link
Okay.
to register for next month in our follow-up email. So apologize, Beth, that it didn't work, but we'll send out the link in the follow-up email. Yeah, and Brenda, I want to make note of Brenda's question as well, because that just
Okay.
came in. She says, besides a code of ethics, what are the best first steps so as to not overwhelm anyone on the team?
Ooh, that is a really good one.
Yeah.
I think my first step would be look at your internal security in your database. That would be my first step is does everybody have the rights they need and not more and not less? If they need more, I would update it to that. I would start with the security and then I would also start looking at if you make no other changes today, don't email files with sensitive information, even to your own team members. Use SharePoint, use shared drives. Email is so easily not corrupted, but it's so
Intercepted.
easily it's
Yeah.
intercepted. Thank you. I needed the word. Those would be my first things. And obviously, there's so much more you can do, but that's where I would say start code of ethics, security, stop sending stuff by email.
I would
Lucy,
also add, if you're one of the folks that does not have documented data policies or procedures written down, start there. And
yeah,
you want to
yeah,
get everyone's input when you're creating documentation. So it's a really good way to kind of get everyone to the table to kind of put their 2 cents in
yeah,
on how are we
definitely.
collectively handling our data.
And also, there's this advertisement I've seen from an AI tool that will like do your policies and presentations for you, where it'll say you just turn it on and it writes your procedures guide. Please be careful with things like that because you don't know where your data is going. And if you are opening a donor record with something like that on your computer, you could potentially be sending your donor's information into a language learning machine that you have zero control over. So that's a totally separate security piece, but be very cautious with AI if you don't know where it's going. Anyway,
Yeah.
I sidetracked that. But Lucy, would you add anything to this?
I would say let's start with having three frameworks: your data acquisition. So, how is your data coming in and where it's coming from? Your retention. How long are you going to hold on to stuff? I know we're all concerned with record band limits, et cetera, with the Razor's Edge. So, sometimes cost may be a factor. So, how long are you holding on to records? And if you're destroying it, how are you destroying records? It's not simply enough to say delete, right? There has to
Yeah.
be
Is it still
there's
somewhere?
certain applications that will wipe servers even on Microsoft 365. So those would be the three best policy practices that I would make sure you'd look at. The principle of least privilege for sure. And then make sure you hold your donor or your vendors accountable. Those are the three ones that I would say, like, what are their donor retention
Mm-hmm.
destruction policies? And it's okay to say, hey, um, what are your policies? And do you have multi-factor authentication? How are you protecting me? One of the things we do with our clients is we will often take IDs. If we're doing donor data, we will only use IDs. And only at the end will we put in name information when we're publishing it, let's say in a Power BI report, for example. But then it's also protected by your 365 and other elements, right? So we will not use names. I know everybody loves to see first name, last name, email, address, and then gift amounts. No, no, no. We don't need to see everything under the sun. So let's
Yeah,
protect our data. Let's segment as much as possible because then we're not having to do that.
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
And the
I
fact that you're
went ahead.
having these conversations, kudos to everyone for even
Yeah.
being
And
here and forward thinking enough.
for staying on after the time. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Mhm.
everyone. Let's be honest. Everyone had their calendar blocked off till the top of the hour anyway. So, but really quickly, I did put the link for the March
Thank
registration in the
you.
chat. So that's there. Again, I'll send it out with the recording. So just really quickly, some of the services that NPact offers. We do database assessments. We do a lot of training. This is custom training fitted for your needs for your organization. We do virtual and on-site sessions can be recorded. And then we just do kind of general consulting hours as well, where you have something that you either want to do that you don't have time to do, or there's something you want to do that you don't know how to do. You can ask us to do that for you. And so we would love to talk to you about those services. Our contact information is, I believe, on the next slide.
Oh,
Oh no.
there it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Our contact information is here. Um, There's mine and Christine's
Mine
and
is
Lucy's
actually
as well.
spelled wrong, but that's okay.
Robertson. Oh yeah, TSON. Sorry. Again, we'll include that in the recording. So, if Lucy has some information, we'll include that in the email as well for the webinars and stuff that she spoke about. Cool. Thank you all very much for
Thank you
joining
so
us.
much.
We look forward to seeing you again in March. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, or have any follow up from today's webinar. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Lucy, as well, for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Appreciate you joining and starting the conversation.
Yeah, thanks everyone.